Hi friends, Catherine Korostoff here, and today we're going to talk about emotions. Emotions is a great topic for market researchers, and it's also a challenging topic. There are cases where we are doing research, it could be qualitative or quantitative research, where we are seeking to understand our participants' emotions or our target market's emotions. But identifying emotional content in research and finding ways to effectively describe emotional responses can be really challenging. So, in this conversation, I'm going to give you one tactic that you can use to very efficiently and effectively identify and describe emotional responses in a way that your clients or your research readers, your stakeholders, whoever is receiving your research results, that they'll be able to truly understand what you've gathered and what you're reporting. We want to make sure that when they're reading the results about emotions, that they find it to be useful. So let's talk about why we need to do this in market research, and then I'm going to share a model with you. So why do market researchers care about understanding emotions? Well, if you think about your own work in market research, you've probably done work that either directly or indirectly has uncovered consumer emotions. And by the way, this applies to B2B too. We like to sometimes pretend like all B2B decisions and behaviors are totally rational. But whether we're talking about B2B or consumer, not all decisions are rational. We know from a ton of research that's been done in behavioral science and consumer psychology and advertising effectiveness that there are a lot of emotional factors that influence things about, again, consumer behavior. So, as market researchers, we need to often look at both rational and emotional drivers of behavior. If we only focus on the rational stuff, like if we're doing research on a particular product category and we want to understand, sort of what levers we can pull to help promote sales of that specific product category, if we only focus on the rational things, on the rational functional product attributes, we're missing stuff. We're missing the other part of the consumer experience with the product, which can be very much emotional and very subjective. So we now know from, again, a wide variety of sources that emotions have an impact on consumer behavior. So, as market researchers, that's important to us. And this can come up in a lot of different types of projects, but probably the four most common are projects related to product response. So, product concept testing, anytime where you're showing people either a prototype of a product or you're describing a product concept and you're trying to get their reaction to it. The reaction is going to be based on some mix of both rational and emotional responses. So if I really want to understand why people are responding to a product in a specific way, whether it's positive or negative, I want to make sure that I'm not just hearing about their rationalized decision criteria for that product. I want to make sure I'm also getting the emotional response. Product perceptions also. So I might not be doing a specific product test. I might just be doing research to understand product perceptions. Maybe I'm doing research in a product category where there's perhaps some substitute product categories that are adjacent, and I'm trying to explore perceptions of the different product categories, why people choose to adopt one type of product versus another type of product, et cetera. And in that case, when I'm looking at product perceptions, again, emotions can be the big difference. Somebody might say, well, these two products are functionally equivalent, but when I delve deeper, I find out that they prefer the one with which they have a stronger emotional reaction. What is that reaction? Where did it come from? All of that can be very, very rich, very helpful for us to understand. Not surprisingly, brand perceptions also have emotional content. If you think about brand perceptions, let's think about products that you may have in your own household. If you look around and you look at products in your household, you look at your refrigerator, you look at your car, go out to your garage, and maybe you've got camping equipment piled up, and wait a minute, I see my camping stove. Oh, wait, that's a Coleman camping stove. Oh, I have a fond memory of camping, and my camping stove was handed down to me from my grandfather, who used it, and then my mother used it. Now I'm using it, and you end up with this strong emotional association with the Coleman brand because of this nostalgia that you have, this family history that you have that makes you really feel good about that brand. Now, that's a hypothetical example, of course, but hopefully it does a good job of illustrating the fact that we do all have feelings about many of the brands of products that we have in our own homes. So if we are doing research where we do want to understand brand perceptions, especially brand preference, or how brand perceptions correlate to brand preference and ultimately behavior, we do need to make sure that we're capturing the emotional content as well. And with advertising, a lot of research has been done on the effect of emotional content in advertising. There have been numerous studies. The Journal of Advertising, by the way, has published many of these studies over the years, so I highly recommend the Journal of Advertising. You can access the abstracts of many of their articles on Google Scholar. And you'll see that there's been a ton of research that shows that ads with emotional content are more correlated to desirable behaviors, whether it's purchase intent or giving positive word of mouth, etc., than ads that are purely objective and rational. And we see evidence of this, right? For example, we see plenty of ads that do bring in children or nostalgia or family. You know, they're not doing it because those pictures look pretty. They're doing it because they're trying to trigger a desirable emotional response that is correlated to a desirable behavior. So these are 4 common examples of projects that involve emotions that you may run into in your work as a market researcher. But again, there are many others, but hopefully those examples kind of got you started thinking about your own work as a market researcher. Now, when we talk about identifying and describing emotions, the most productive thing that you can do is to start with an existing model of emotions. Now, there are a number of different models that are out there, but this particular model was created many years ago by Richard Plutchik. It's commonly used in the field of psychology. He was a very famous psychologist and college professor, and his model is really probably, if not the most famous one that's widely used throughout the social sciences, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3. And this is a simple version of his 8 core emotions that he identified in his model. So if you think about it, if you imagine, for example, that you are doing research to test response to some advertising, and you want to see what emotional responses people had to the advertising. As you're going through that research, whether it was quantitative or qualitative, you're going to need to describe those emotions. And sometimes that can be challenging. So use an existing model. First of all, that gives you credibility. You're not just making something up, but you can start with this existing model to say, which of the 8 common emotions were most prevalent? Was it disgust, anger, anticipation, joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness? This gives you a great starting place so that you can say which emotions were most prevalent and which ones were least prevalent. And then within each of these 8 categories, of course, there can be degrees of intensity. So you don't just have to say, oh, the participants from this particular cohort exhibited more fear, and the participants from this cohort were predominantly evoking or had emotions related to joy in response to the same ad. You can talk about the degree of fear. Was it a little bit of fear? Was it a lot of fear? Was the joy, mild joy, just like, slight indications of joy, or were they very strong indications of joy? So it's okay to bring in degrees of these things. You don't just have to say the response was fear or the response was joy, but use that as your starting place, and then you can talk about the degrees to which those things were seen. But this way now you've got a common way of categorizing the emotions so that as you're comparing emotions, for example, from ad to ad or from cohort to cohort, that you're using common language that will make it easier for your reader, your research client or stakeholder, to compare and contrast the results. So give it a try. If you haven't done something like this before, give it a try. The next time you're writing up research results where you do have to talk about emotional content, use this model as a way to describe consistently what the emotions are that you're reporting. And I think you'll find that this also will make your reporting of emotional content a lot easier and, frankly, a lot more useful for your research readers. I hope this topic was useful for you. Again, the Journal of Advertising Research has published a ton of studies over the last 30 years about the importance of emotional content in advertising, which is a great way of really trying to quantify the importance of this. So do check out that resource. If you found this conversation helpful, please give us a like. And I do want to note that this conversation is originally recorded in video, but the audio version is available on Apple Podcasts as well as on Audible on Amazon. And I also want to point out that if you're listening to this on audio, but you wanted to see the model of the emotions that I shared, you can check it out on the YouTube version of this, and I'll also post a link to it. Thanks, and have a great day.